Well, hey there again, friends. Hope everyone's doing well today. It's Friday. I think it's October 23rd, 2020. The days, they just blend together. This whole year has just been a complete blur for a lot of people. I would imagine it's pretty much universal. I don't think I've talked to anybody who hasn't said this year has just blown right by them. And probably for good reason, because the human mind tends to forget trauma and want to forget about, chaotic moments, as much as we'd like to believe that a lot of folks do dwell on the past, but it's generally built into our minds to want to forget trauma and traumatic events, and I think that might play a role, but also just all the chaos that's going on in the world. There's a lot of things to talk about, and in, I guess, this specific video, I'm just going to mainly address some of the concerns that I have, and I'm not here to talk about any specific subject, but rather to let everybody know about some changes that I'm making in my own life as far as this channel and my podcasts. I've already mentioned this, but I finally did it. I was thinking about goals the other day. I'm like, you've got to do what you want to do, figure out how to do it. I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't realize you had to pay to host your own podcast, so I figured all that out and then distributed it to the various channels, and so now I have the 15-minute Free Thinking podcast, which is up on iTunes, Spotify, Google, I think, a few other ones, anywhere I could put it. And I'm planning on doing something a little more, let's just say a little more involved. I have a lot more research. When I make YouTube videos, I do tend to just talk to the camera, and even if I have notes, it's hard to talk about facts and figures and numbers. A lot of people don't want to hear facts and numbers, and a lot do, but even it's hard to remember these things. I really enjoy the podcast format myself. I didn't realize how much I really love them until I started listening to them as I was going to bed, and I was kind of inspired to just, start doing it. So I have a couple uploaded right now, but I'm planning on having guests and having interviews with people that I think are interesting. Like my wife was saying, hey, we should do something, psyched substance. We had talked about doing a video together a couple of years back. Thought maybe I could do a quick interview with him. But I want to do mostly interviews with regular people. That is like a thing that I think that is really overlooked in the internet world. It's like, let's bring on this famous person and talk with them. Okay, great. But, what about an average person, And I think that those are some of the most interesting ones in my personal opinion. But I'd just like to say, for my patrons on Patreon, you can always leave a message on Patreon with a video suggestion. And I will make a video about that topic. And a lot of people don't realize that. I can't know who my patrons are in the comments section, and it gets really confusing, especially with all the different screen names. And that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about, this crazy technological world we're living in and trying to adapt. A lot of people completely embrace it. Gen X, Gen Y, Z, they're going to totally embrace the digital revolution. I'm Gen X, and I kind of watched it, morph. I mean, I played an Atari when I was a kid, but, times change, and you have to keep up. Podcasting is something that is really becoming popular, and that's not why I'm doing it, but I mention that because I can see why. It's so enjoyable to just hear real people talk about things, talk about life, and laugh, and have fun with it. I think that's what we need more of. We are so inundated and immersed in facts and figures. I mean, sure, there's some things I do want to talk about that are really important. I have a book I've been writing that I'm more or less done with about opioids, and not just that, but the pharmaceutical industry in general, which gives a fair shake. I don't just sit there and promote natural medicine. What I say is that everybody needs to look at the benefits and risks to each drug. But how much money is going to the drug companies from your tax dollars to subsidize their research, and then the people end up paying twice as much for drugs that we've had forever? Those are important things to talk about. Or the fact that the prison industrial complex is basically getting privatized more and more every day, that prisoners are a commodity, and so a poor guy on the street isn't worth anything, but he's worth 50 grand a year in a prison. It's pretty scary, and it's pretty sad. And I'm not going to go any more into the dark corruption of the world and all the future of mankind here. I say this because it's important that we do talk about these things, because it's reality. We're facing some grim times in the future. It's natural for us to want to ignore it. And I totally understand. But if we do, things repeat. For example, in the 80s, actually just the other day, the Sackler family, who were the owners of Purdue Pharma, which created OxyContin, knowing how addictive it was, the potential damage. It wasn't America's first opioid epidemic. We've had them after wars, too, with soldiers. So when that happened, they were well aware of what was happening. 90% of OxyContin that was sold in Florida, through the pill mills, through these... And I really don't want to go too far into this because I have a personal vested gripe with this, just like a lot of you do. Most people know somebody who's harmed by this bullshit system that they have down there, the revolving doors in the treatment centers, where they're not really there to help you. They basically just want the money from the taxes. And actually, at this very moment, my wife is like the farthest we've ever been apart. She's out east visiting her sister, whose daughter died October 27th of last year from an overdose. After being released from jail without any supervision, without any notification to her family, knowing she was an addict and she had issues. The story pisses me off. Everybody has a story like that. It's just coincidental that I'm getting ready to do this paper during the same exact time while my wife's over there with her sister helping to console her over losing her daughter, who was, I believe, 24. 23. It's just sad. And so these issues have to be talked about. I'm definitely going to be reading the entire book that I wrote in its entirety on a podcast. I don't know how long it'll be. Last time I looked, it was like 40, 50 pages, I think. I mean, depending on the print. So I really want to share it because I think it's important. But on the lighter side of things, I'm going to be doing full podcast episodes about things like, enlightenment or false gurus, things like that, mythology. And if you're not a mythologically interested person, just go listen to Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. Or philosophers like Terence McKenna and Alan Watts, which a lot of people write off as just being stoners. Or Alan Watts was a drunk, or, Terence McKenna took too many psychedelics. I guarantee if you listen to one of Terence's hour-long lectures, he can put out some fucking amazing content. I mean, the guy was a powerhouse of knowledge. And that's one of the next subjects with psychedelics. Something that can, coincidentally actually help people who are in those states of mind, who are taking pharmaceuticals for whether it be pain, anxiety, or depression. Often one dose of psilocybin can cure this long term. And it's a bold claim, but it's been shown to be true over and over. This is why it's on the ballot in Oregon this year, where they're voting to not just decriminalize all drugs, but specifically legalize psilocybin to be administered to people. Now, they already have groups that do it for people, PTSD, soldiers, patients, people who have suffered abuse. We're adults and we should have rights to these things. Talking about drugs has always been so taboo. In fact, I still feel tacky and dirty inside when I talk about drugs, and I think, wait a minute. I've even had people make me feel guilty about talking about Kratom, which Kratom is a fucking amazing tool that has helped me overcome some of my own anxiety and depression. There was a time in my 30s where I was stressed out all the time, and I tried taking benzos, and I stepped back and said, wait, I'm not going to end up like one of those guys that just takes pills to hide my pain. But Kratom did help without hiding who I was and who I am. And I still take it today. So, to kind of wrap this up, I think one of the problems is I should wrap up the thing about the Sackler family and my point about history. As the Sackler family owned Purdue Pharma, and now they were just sued for $8 billion, which is like what? A drop in a bucket. It's nothing to them. $8 billion fine for, killing all those Americans and creating a bunch of addicts, but knowingly. But even after that was in litigation, and this was ongoing, up until just a few years ago, the other company, Insys, which made Subsys, which was basically fentanyl, they knew exactly what they were doing. Then they had a bunch of lawsuits. Same problem. Stocks drop, but they make their money and they get out. This is the world that we're living in, and we have to talk about these things. It's really crucial that people be aware. It's kind of like, we are all sheeple, but it's not about the grand. hidden conspiracies. It's about what's right in front of your goddamn face. What's happening right here. Right there. Corporations, you can see how they lobby Congress. You can see how they lobby and pay presidents. All of them get money. It's a joke. It's a complete joke. It's a sham. And it's hard to like have a positive outlook when I see my kids in there and I think they're going to be growing up. And what? What jobs will they have? You know, what is school going to teach them? You know, the questions that I ask are, who are the people out there that have no conscience? There are very few, but there's a lot of them in numbers when you can consider 7.5 billion people. Even if 1% are psychotic, that's a lot of psychotic people. And a lot of these people become CEOs, and they're looking to hire people with no conscience, people who will just sell their products. So we have these illegal opioid dealers getting off scot-free, killing millions, and then, well, thousands at least. I mean, 40,000 people die a year from opioids, 40 to 50,000, I think. And half of those are from legal opioids, not heroin. So fentanyl's kind of taking the cake now. But so how do we have a positive outlook? And just leave it at that. We can have a positive outlook by emotional intelligence and understanding how we feel and really trying to understand how other people feel. I can't state that enough. I don't think it could be any simpler, honestly. Empathy, it's not about tolerating and putting up with bullshit in life. It's not about just having pity for everybody. It's about having pity for the human condition. That we're running around in suits and ties and we don't know where we're going. It's the Sunday drive syndrome is what I've been thinking of it as. You know, sometimes you drive, get in your car, and you drive to work. You have a place to go. We're just driving in circles, building and building and building, and pretty soon we're going to run out of gas, literally and metaphorically. And so in the meantime, I'd like to be able to share some of these facts and figures, and I hope my podcast can open and shed some light on these things, and I hope people like it. And as I said, any suggestions are welcome. So that's about all I've got right now. I mean, I don't care much about stocks and bonds, all right? I'm the average American. I don't care about how well the stock market's doing. When the airlines are getting bailed out and the average American can't even put foot on their table sometimes because of what's going on, it's an insane time to be alive right now. And Americans, because that's where I live, and I can't speak for everyone in the world, there are many worse conditions out there. But in America, we better stand up for what's right and not against each other, or we're going to be in for some problems. So I'm going to go on with my list of my patrons, because I think I should put that in a video. Josh O'Brien, as I say, he's like my mega patron. It was crazy. I haven't really read off the list. But we've got Jake Dugan, Matt Hemingway, Adam Mansenson, River Milliken, Tim Smith, and Zelda Zonk. I'm going to stop right there for a minute. The weirdest thing, every time I see Zelda Zonk, I think, oh, Zonk. It was a game I played with dice when I was young. It's like 10,000, but you play it smoking weed every 1,000 points. And then I thought, well, I played Zonk, but I used to play Zelda around the same time. I love that game. And I thought, isn't that weird? Somebody has 2 games for a name, at least in my mind. It's a cool name if it's the real name. Anyhow, MJ Pritchett, Sean Fitzpatrick, Rochelle Borth, Bill Hunt, Highway Child, Seam Bob, Jay McBroderick, Rob Franzen, Chris Morales, Algirdas Vallis, William Hall, Brianna Rotten, Jake Alberg, Sean Schwartzwelder, Alexander Walpole, Russell Imam, Pia Ewings, Riku Ivanem, The Hill and Moon, Mumps, John Peterson, Joshua Nicholson, Don Starnes, and Deborah E. Chan. I'm amazed I can actually read that list. It's small print. It's kind of far away. I'm not that old yet. Thank you all immensely for, there's kind of this fine line between, if you mention Patreon, people think you're begging, but if you don't mention Patreon, you're not giving your patrons credit. And I'm like, that ain't cool. So like I said, all patrons can post, recommendations for videos they want to see. And as I said, the podcast is everywhere. I will still make videos. I still enjoy talking to the camera. I still have a lot of things to talk about, shooting the shit with y'all. But I'm hoping the podcast format will allow me to have all my notes present and really give you some information that you can use, hopefully. And even if not, we'll have a good time. Talk to y'all later. Be well.